Thom Hartmann here on the best of the rest of economic and labor news. You need to know this. Last week, thousands of workers from across the country took part in mass protests in more than 200 cities. From New York to Los Angeles to New Orleans, low-wage workers joined the Fight for 15 movement and called for the right to unionize and for livable wages. In addition to fighting for better lives for themselves, it turns out that these workers are also fighting to save taxpayers over $150 billion a year. According to a recent report from the University of California, Berkeley, poverty wages aren't just hurting workers. They're costing us a fortune. Even working full-time, a parent making a minimum wage doesn't earn enough to live above the poverty line, and that means that you and I have to make up the difference. When corporations skimp on wages, taxpayers pick up the tab for public assistance programs like food stamps, Medicaid, and housing assistance. While it's extremely important that our nation has a strong social safety net to make sure these people don't starve on the streets, it's also imperative that these programs exist for more than just corporate welfare. The fight for higher wages isn't just about these low-wage workers. It's about all of us and our entire economy. Corporations used to pay workers enough to support themselves, but businesses have pushed the cost onto us. Cheating workers out of a livable wage denies them the dignity that they deserve, and it's time for each and every one of us to stand up and demand a change. When low-wage workers earn enough to survive, our entire nation does better, and it's up to us to join the fight and help make that happen. Here in the U.S., we're supposed to appreciate massive corporations that dominate a market. In the European Union, however, regulators actually stand up to corporate monopolies. Last week, the EU Competition Commission opened an antitrust investigation into Google's business practices. Officials say the giant tech firm gives itself an unfair advantage over competitors by, quote, systematically favoring its own comparison shopping product in its general search engine results pages. In other words, Google prioritizes their own products and search results, which makes it harder for competitors to sell to consumers. In a statement about the charges, officials said, the Commission's preliminary view is that such conduct infringes on EU antitrust rules because it stifles competition and harms consumers. If Google is found to have violated the law, they could face up to $6 billion in fines and have to change their business practices in the EU. It's no secret that this massive company dominates the market in much of the world, but it would be remarkable if our own country stood up to this tech monopoly. In the richest nation on earth, the number of homeless children has grown by 60% over the last 6 years. And according to Paul Buchheit over at Alternet, our country's wealth has grown by $30 trillion during that same period. While the 1% continues to stockpile cash, our nation has the highest child poverty rate in the developed world. According to UNICEF, children's material well-being is the highest in the Netherlands and the 4 Nordic countries, and lowest in Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, and the United States. Yet, despite these staggering statistics, Republicans in Congress want to slash the budgets for food stamps, Head Start, and public education even more. Is this what they mean when they talk about American exceptionalism? If we can afford to give the wealthy more tax breaks, we can afford to make sure that kids have enough to eat. If we say that we can afford another senseless war, there shouldn't be a problem with funding the programs that protect our kids. According to a recent survey from Gallup, right now, about 9 out of 10 American adults say that they have health insurance. Thanks to Obamacare, the uninsured rate continues to drop, and the number of people going without health coverage continues to decline. And the researchers explained that the biggest change in the uninsured rate has occurred in groups that have previously struggled to obtain insurance, like minorities and low-income Americans. In an interview with the Associated Press, Dan Witters, the research director for Gallup's poll, said the Affordable Care Act had 3 major objectives: increase coverage, slow the rate of increase in costs, and improve health. He added the first one is clearly a win. Coverage is increasing. There's no question about it. However, the uninsured rate could drop by another 2 points if Republican lawmakers would just stop blocking Medicaid expansion in their states. Expanding health care shouldn't be controversial. It should be celebrated as an American victory. And we should keep pushing until everyone in our country has access to the health care that they deserve. And finally, when it comes to elections, every state should take a cue from Montana. Last week, that state's legislature passed a sweeping bipartisan campaign finance bill, which will put an end to the flood of so-called dark money in Montana's elections. That's the electoral spending done by nonprofit groups that's plagued Montana's statewide elections since 2007. Even before the disastrous Citizens United ruling by the Supreme Court, an earlier ruling allowed nonprofits to collect corporate money and use it to manipulate politicians in their state. This new legislation will require all groups to disclose their donors, regardless of their nonprofit status, if they spend money in elections within 60 days of the vote. In a statement about the new bill, Governor Steve Bullock said, Montana elections are about to become the most transparent in the nation, requiring those trying to influence our elections to come out of the dark money shadows. He added, our elections should be decided by Montanans, not shadowy dark money groups. Big question is whether our federal lawmakers will be brave enough to follow Montana and stand up to the big money that has corrupted our political system, and whether in the future Montana is going to take that 60-day restriction and run it out for months or maybe even years before elections, which is what it should be. And that's the way it is for the week of April 20th, 2015. I'm Thom Hartmann on Labor and Economic News.